and trust everything is going to come out okay. And you don't need to know what everybody else is doing. Too many people have crossed lines, and let's be protective of one another. Leave a place better than you found it. Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal McDaniel, and this is The Naked Singer. Today, we're going to be discussing boundaries, and boundaries was a subject that was picked by our next podcast, Skylar Smith. She is a personal trainer and has just graduated college and has her own fitness line called Limitless by Sky. And she just does a tremendous job at helping people be their best selves through nutrition and working out. So you need to check out Sky Fitness on Instagram and her Limitless workout wear. But she's going to be on here next week. But she asked me if I would discuss boundaries because that was a topic that meant something to her. So that's what we're going to discuss today. And I'm also going to let you know that I'm making some changes on the podcast, which is a good thing because we're in episode 14. And since I'm learning more and more about podcasting, I have decided that I've really honed it into the 3 areas that work best for a singer and really for anybody. That to do anything well, your bodies, your mind, and your soul have to work together. So we're going to keep on topic and keep on going in that direction so that we can become our best selves. So that's what we're going to be doing on this particular podcast and on all the other ones. So today, as we're discussing boundaries, and as I was researching about boundaries this week, what I found out is that boundaries have about 6 main areas that they work out of. So we're going to discuss those 6 areas of boundaries. So here we go. We're going to start with number 1. And number 1 is your physical boundaries. Now, I have notes on my iPad, so I'm going to be glancing over there and looking at those notes so that I can make sure that I'm saying everything correctly, because boundaries are something that I have always struggled with in my life. I allowed people to really do things and walk all over me and tell me who I was and who I am and how I need to be doing things. And that is not okay behavior. That is just not okay behavior. And I think nowadays, more and more people, they're just not caring about other people's boundaries and are losing the ability to be respectful, or maybe not the ability. I think everyone has the ability to be respectful, but they're just not thinking about being respectful to the boundaries of other people. And I know growing up, we had no boundaries at our house. So my parents, well, they had 2. We don't talk about finances, and you don't come in our bedroom without knocking on the door. Yet they were more than able to come in on us all the time and look at anything and everything that we already had. And we couldn't keep anything that was just for us. And when we pointed out points of anger or things, we just got in trouble and we got punished for pointing out things that maybe we should have had discussions about. And that shows you that there was no respect and there was a real lack of boundaries, which taught my other sibling to not have boundaries either. And I've had to learn them. I'm sure at first I did not have any boundaries either. And now over the years, I've learned that, you have to be respectful. But I have to say that I always wanted to respect other people and their energy and their thought processes. I just wasn't perfect at it. And I wasn't always perfect at respecting time boundaries. And I wasn't really good at expecting or respecting assignment boundaries, all kinds of stuff. So, there are many, many different types of boundaries that we have to learn to be respectful to, and to make sure that we're taking our part in the responsibility for not crossing those boundaries and doing what we need to do to be the best person that we can be. So that's something to really know that when we're dealing with boundaries, that's what we're talking about. So the very first boundary that we're going to deal with is the physical boundaries. And what are physical boundaries? So I'm going to define physical boundaries as boundaries that include your need for personal space, your contact with touch, and your physical needs like needing to rest or eat food or drink water. Those physical needs are something that we have to make sure that we have hard boundaries on, because if not, then we're going to deny ourselves certain needs that we actually have. So like, I'm not necessarily the most touchy-feely person. So if I'm busy, I don't really like for people to come up and try to get in my space and hug me and stuff. And so I have to be open and ready for that. So I'm just, physical touch is a thing, and I would prefer that people give me my space, especially when I'm working, and then ask me if they want a hug or whatever. My daughter Rosemary, that I've mentioned on this before, she has to say, because her love language is physical touch, and so is my husband. So they have to say, can I give you a hug? And I'm like, sure. So when it's that way and they're asking, then I'm more than happy to, especially when I'm not working. But if somebody just comes in and starts touching me while I'm working, it really bothers me, because I want them to give me my space so that I can concentrate and not be distracted by anything else. So that's one way that that's one example that physical touch has a boundary, so that you can start thinking about how that works. Also, your comfort with touch. There are people that aren't comfortable with being touched. Touch is a big deal, especially if they have Asperger's or autism, or some people have texture problems and things like that. So that's past their comfort zone, and that's past their boundary, and we need to be respectful of that. Also, sometimes you need rest, and you need to make sure that you're eating and drinking and getting the water and the nutrition that you need. And sometimes those things are completely left out, especially if you're working and somebody says, okay, I'm sorry, I have to go eat. My assistant does that a lot. Mara does that one a lot. She needs to eat, and that's okay, because I'm not someone that necessarily needs to eat. I'm supposed to eat, but I don't really think, because when I get into the work zone, I forget. Mara always has to say, did you eat lunch? Did you get a snack? Because I don't do that for myself. So that's actually even a boundary that I cross. But also, my dad used to drive, and we'd go on trips, and he never would stop just to go to the bathroom. He would not allow us to stop. If we weren't planned and scheduled to have a normal stop, he wouldn't stop. And then you really had to go to the bathroom, and he would just be like, hold it. Well, that is not okay to do, because it's not healthy for the body to just hold and hold and hold when you really need to go. So that's another boundary. So those physical needs that you have, that's a boundary that shouldn't be crossed, and that's a boundary that you should hold, and you should speak out when you have that need. Like my daughter Rosemary says, Mommy, will you hug me? And sometimes I have to go, give me 1 minute to finish this up, and then I will come over there and do that, because she wants a hug, and she needs that for herself, and she needs that reassurance. I'm in the middle of something. So to not cross my boundaries, she asks for what she needs, and then I get up and go and give it to her. So my boundary is not so staunch that I don't come up to get to an end point for a moment, or a pause moment for a moment, so that I can go and help her and give her what she needs, or any other family member that I have. That's the way that needs to work. So there's a give and take on that, but at the same time, there's still respect in the boundary. And she's very similar that way, because if she's working, she doesn't want to be disturbed. She doesn't want that rhythm to be interrupted. So we have to have that too. There are things that she needs. There are things that my other daughter Rachel needs to make sure that her boundaries are respected, as well as my son and my husband. So you have to know that in a family, that just because you're the mom and the dad doesn't give you license to cross over your child's boundary, because there's needs that your child has that you've got to be respectful of, and to make sure that you're teaching them that you will respect their boundaries and they need to respect yours. So in other words, don't just bust in their room and start going through their diaries and combing through all their text messages. Now, should you monitor those things? Yes, but you need to monitor it in a respectful way, especially if they're a minor child. You need to tell them when you give them the equipment, when you give them the phone, I'm giving you this phone and I'm paying for the phone. So here's the boundary. I'm going to be able to check your text messages, your messenger messages, your Instagram, your Facebook. So I'm going to need to have your passwords. I'm not going to do it every day, and I'm not going to intrude all the time. But when I ask you to let me look at it, you need to hand it over and let me look at it, or the phone goes away. There, you're drawing a boundary as a parent so that you can monitor your child, but your child gets the respect of knowing that they have some space and a boundary too. And that's something that is a give and take that helps you teach a healthy boundary system. If you are tired and you have a physical need because you're tired, you need to say, you know what, I need to sit down for a moment. I need to rest for a moment. If you're not a big hugger like me, you just say, you know what, I'm not a big hugger, but I like to shake hands, or I'll do a fist bump, or whatever. That's okay. Those are things that you need to stand up for and say that you have this particular boundary for. If you're allergic to something, you need to speak up and say that. You need to say, but you don't need to hold back because you think it's going to hurt somebody's feelings or offend them in some way, because that's a boundary for you. And you need them to know so that they don't accidentally cause harm. Also, you need to understand theirs so that you don't actually accidentally cause harm. Because in the end, Prentice Hemphill has a definition of boundaries. Prentice Hemphill is a podcaster also. She has a great podcast. And one of the things that Prentice says is a boundary is defined by the fact that I can love me and you at the same time. So we've crossed boundaries if you're not able to love yourself and love the other person at the same time. So we have to think about that and how it applies to each one of these things that we're talking about today. And the first one is physical needs. So you got to make sure that you understand that to love yourself and to love somebody else at the exact same time, that boundary needs to be respected in our physical needs. Now, the next one is emotional boundaries. Emotional boundaries are probably the number one problem that people walk all over and cross all the time. I think people stomp on emotional boundaries probably every single day. And we need to be careful about paying attention to people's emotional boundaries. That's something that we need to be constantly aware of. Emotional boundaries are all about respecting and honoring feelings and energy. Setting emotional boundaries means recognizing how much emotional energy you are capable of taking in, knowing where to share and when not to share, and limiting emotional sharing with people who respond poorly. I think that is an excellent definition of emotional boundaries. We have to understand that we can't trust everyone with what is going on with us. We just can't. we can't trust all family members with what is going on with us, because a lot of times the closest people to you are the people that don't understand why you feel the way you feel. And that's not okay. The people closest to you need to understand why you feel the way you feel, and they need to be your biggest supporters, but that doesn't always occur. So we need to understand our emotional boundaries and the emotional boundaries from other people, so that we don't violate their boundaries as well. And these boundary things they're very hard, and they're hard to discern because they're invisible boundaries. It's not like we can see a physical fence there. So we have to actually be aware of ourselves so that we can be aware for others at the exact same time. Like, if you feel like when you share your feelings, you're getting criticized, that's somebody crossing your emotional boundary. Instead of validating your feelings, they're criticizing your feelings. I got that a lot growing up. And I was constantly told, well, you're just too reactive and you're just too emotional. Well, some of that is because I'm an artist and because I'm a singer, but I don't think you're too anything. I think that's something that you have to be able to use. You just also need to be able to control it, because self-control is one of the fruits of the Spirit that God gives us. So I think that we have to maintain control over that. But at the exact same time, it's not okay to criticize somebody's feelings because they're legitimate. Everybody has a right to feel the way they feel. I have a right to feel the way I feel. You have a right to feel the way you feel. So being criticized for it is not an okay way to respond, and it really crosses a boundary. Instead of criticizing, try listening. Try listening to why people feel the way they feel. Now, I also say on my side that you need to be that, when I'm dealing with my emotional boundaries, this is where I said a few weeks ago in a podcast that our emotional vocabulary is very poor. So when you're talking about your emotions, be very specific. Think of other words other than happy, mad, sad, frustrated, or anxious, or, think of another word that you can use. Upset's one of those five: happy, sad, mad, frustrated, or upset. See if you can find another word that will describe really specifically what you're feeling, because that helps other people to be able to identify with you and be more empathetic. And then they're less likely to criticize. Most of the time, we lead a sentence with, well, you made me feel this. And here's the thing. People can't make you feel anyway. They can't make you do it. We feel that way because of circumstances, because of our reactions, because of how we heard something being said. So we need to make sure that we're communicating and we're clarifying exactly what is being said to us before we jump on the bandwagon of getting our feelings hurt and getting upset in those big top five. Maybe we can say, when you said that, that made me feel really powerless. Or that made me feel pretty betrayed. And this is why. And then our communication can get better, because most of the time people don't want you to feel abandoned or betrayed or powerless. They're not trying to do that. They're trying to express their own need, and they've just done it poorly as well. So that's something that we have to think about all the time. And as singers, when we're describing the emotional content that's going on under a text, and we're writing our subtext so that we can act out a piece, we really have to think about how this character would feel. and what the emotional makeup of the character. And it cannot be, oh, I'm happy here, oh, I'm sad here. It must be something deeper than that, because those deeper emotions are what drive those 5 umbrella emotions, the biggest reactionary emotions that we have. So it's much better to really have a better emotional vocabulary so that we can communicate in the best way, especially when we're on the stage and we're trying to communicate a story. It can't be generalized. It really needs to be specific so the character can come alive. And I think that the emotional boundaries, those are the ones that we can use the most in order to help us do that, plus help us be able to communicate with other people better and hold our boundaries and learn that we don't trust people with just everything. We cannot trust them with just everything, because most people are not trustworthy. There are only a closed few people to you that can actually help you carry the baggage that you have, and that will be trustworthy and that will keep that circumstance for you and honor that and understand where you're coming from. Because most people are not going to do that. So you don't want to just babble your stuff off to everybody, because then you're opening yourself up to the fact that people aren't going to be honorable, and then you're going to get hurt more and more. So it's much easier to understand that not everybody can deal with your emotional energy. You can't deal with everybody else's emotional energy. You just have to make sure that you set a guard on that particular boundary. So you can say things like, I am so sorry you're having a tough time. Right now, I'm not in a place to take in all of this information. Do you think we can come back to this conversation later? You can say things like that, and that helps you hold your boundary, because it's what I say, I'm not emotionally available. Sometimes I'm going through something and I'm not emotionally available to hear everything. And when I'm not emotionally available to hear everything, then I'm going to say, can we come back to that a little bit later? Because right now is not a real good time for me to be able to process this and help you. And I want to be supportive. You could say, I am having a hard time and really need to talk. Can we meet for coffee? Can we meet for lunch? And let me talk to you about this, because I need somebody to listen. So, those are ways that you can make sure that you're not crossing somebody else's boundary and just spewing all your stuff out, and you're getting your need taken care of at the exact same time. So we've got that give and take going on for us. So that's a good thing that we can do for a boundary. Okay. So here's some other emotional boundary out of bounds things. These things are complete violations if you're dealing with someone's emotional boundaries. Dismissing and criticizing feelings, not okay to do. That is not okay to do. Like I said, everybody is entitled to feel the way they feel. You're entitled to feel the way you feel, and I'm entitled to feel the way I feel. But you don't get to dismiss mine and criticize mine, and it's not okay for me to dismiss yours and criticize yours, because the way everybody feels is legitimate. It's your feeling, and it's legitimate. That's it. Ask questions that are not appropriate for the relationship. That's not okay. To ask questions that aren't appropriate for the relationship, not okay. Sometimes things are just none of your business. So it's not okay for me to ask you things that are incredibly personal, and it's not okay for me to for you to ask me things that are incredibly personal. That's something that needs to be left only to the people in my close circle, not anyone else. And even then, I have a right to go, you know what? I just don't want to talk about that. And that's okay too. That's okay. Reading or going through personal or emotional information. It is never okay to open someone's mail without their permission. That's not okay. Ladies have purses. It is not okay to go through anyone's purse without their permission, or their backpack, or their notebook. That is not okay. It's not okay to go in someone's house and just start opening up cabinets and drawers and looking for things. Ask, where do you keep this? Where do you keep that? I need this. Speak and communicate. Don't violate personal spaces like that and emotional spaces. That's not okay. Those things and those places are not okay. Opening someone's diary and reading their personal thoughts, not okay. It doesn't matter how curious you are. Some things you need to leave alone. Don't open your teacher's grade book. It's none of your business. Just do your work. You only need to know what you are doing, and that's okay. Asking people to justify their feelings. Nope. Out of bounds. A violation. Not okay. Assuming we know how other people feel. That's a big one for me. I hate it when someone assumes they know how I feel, because we have no idea how that person feels. No one has any idea how I feel, and I don't know how they feel. So assuming that I do, not a good thing. Telling other people how they feel, that's not okay. And also telling people that they can't feel the way they feel, that's not okay either. These are all things that are just completely out of bounds and violations of somebody's boundaries. That's not okay. That is not okay. Emotionally dumping on people without their permission. That's why we were saying that, you call them and say, hey, I've got something I need on my chest and I need to really talk about it. Can we meet? Can we talk? But don't just dump it on them. And that was something that I have been really, really guilty of over the years, just dumping my emotional junk instead of asking if they're open to it. That was not okay behavior on my part. And that came from, as I was growing up, that my dad just dumped his emotional junk everywhere. And no matter what, he could dump it and I couldn't dump it. So I had nowhere to go. And so when I went out into the world on my own, I just kept dumping all the stuff because it seemed like that was supposed to be the way it was supposed to be. And a lot of people had to call me out on that because, I needed to keep my mind on where I was other than the problems that had gone on. And, and people did not need, especially when they weren't close to me, they did not need to hear about the junk. I say that was probably the one that I had to break in myself. So if you do those things, you need to really think about it. And going to therapy really has helped me a lot with being able to deal with all of that stuff and having a compartment to put it in. So that's something else that we got to think about. Sharing inappropriate emotional information with your children. Don't do that. Don't do that, because your children aren't emotionally developed enough to be able to carry any adult garbage. So just, be very wary and watch yourself on doing those things so that you can respect their boundary, because their boundary is very small and they need you. So if you need someone, then call a pastor, pray, you do a prayer journal, call a friend, ask them to go to lunch, whatever you need to do, but try to protect your children from your own heavy emotional information that you have. Okay, another boundary number 3 is time boundaries. And this is another one that I struggled with and a lot of people struggle with. Let me tell you, as a voice teacher, time boundaries are really something that I have to be aware of, and I also have to talk about with my students a lot. So time boundaries is a big deal because we need to respect somebody else's time and we need to respect and they need to respect our own time. So make sure that you are respecting each other's time boundaries. And I have to tell myself that too, because I get in the middle of something with a student and I run over time, and I have to go, no. I'm going to stop right here and respect the boundary because the student's got to go. So I have to make sure that I tell myself those things as well. So make sure that time boundaries. So time is valuable, and your time is valuable. And this is a part of the definition of a time boundary. And it is important to protect how it is utilized, because we have a finite amount of time on this planet. So our time is really valuable. So we need to protect how it's utilized. Setting time boundaries is incredibly important at work, home, and socially. Setting time boundaries means understanding your priorities and setting aside enough time for the many areas of in your life that you have without overcommitting. And that's something that I see with people, that they're way overcommitted. They're just way overcommitted. And here's the thing, as a singer, we have to practice because we're athletes. So just like football players and tennis players, we have to make sure that we get our practice time in. And more times than not, overcommitment keeps the student from being able to practice. And it's not just their own overcommitment, it's the overcommitment that comes, especially when they're minors and they're still living at home with their parents because they're in high school or middle school or whatever. Their parents are overcommitted. And so they end up not being able to practice because their parent has to take them here, or they have to go with their parent there. And they're sort of at the mercy of the parent. So I need to say, parents, you're paying for voice lessons, and you're paying for music, and you're paying for dance, and you're paying for all these things for your kids. And you need to respect the fact that they've got to practice, and you've got to look at the schedule and make sure that there is time in there every day for your child to get their homework done and to practice, because it's not fair to them to not be able to work that in. Also, it needs to be emphasized to the student by the parent that practice is very important to reach the goals that they have, and respecting their own time boundaries, where, a friend will call up at the last second. Do you want to go to the mall, or do you want to go to this restaurant, or you want to go to this movie? And that sounds so very enticing. But students, I have to tell you, if you have not done your practice, then the answer needs to be no, because you've got to respect your own time boundaries. And if you have planned that you're going to practice during this time, and that movie is doing this time, you need to just say, is there another time that we can go to the movies? I want to go to the movie, and I would love to see that one with you, but that's smack in the middle of my practice time, and I've got to get that done before I go see a movie. We need to make sure that those time boundaries are really made. If you want to go to the gym and you have that carved out, then guess what? That's a time boundary, and you need to make sure that you go, and you need to make sure that people say, well, can you do this, or can you volunteer for that? You say, no, I have scheduled my gym time. I have this time available and that time available. In my office, I schedule all these lessons. And so I have to really keep up, because I have a lot of students, and I have to really keep up with my schedule so I can make sure that I can keep everything online and get all the things that I need to get done for myself. So I have to really look and see where the openings are, and I can't just go with a friend to lunch if I haven't done my workout, or I haven't gotten my practice done, or I haven't gotten the research done for the podcast, because I have to put those in the middle of all the other stuff and try not to overcommit myself. So that's a boundary, those time boundaries, to respect my own time so that I can have time to rest. I can have time to exercise. I can have time to eat. I can have time to practice. I can have time to study. Those things are important. and you don't put something else before your own goals. That's just the way it works. And it's not okay to put other things before your own goals. If you want to get into college and you want to get a scholarship in music, or if you're going for a certain college that will give you a certain edge in music, then guess what? You're going to have to practice. You cannot wait till the last minute, because music is highly competitive and they only take a few people in certain programs, and you've got to have yourself ready. And you can't do that if it's at the last minute and you haven't respected your own time boundaries. That's something that you've got to pay attention to. You've got to make sure you have a calendar. You've got to make sure that you keep up with it. And you've got to make sure that you look at it every day, because what you need for yourself is really important. And other people do not get to interrupt that. And you don't get to interrupt somebody else's time schedule. And it's not okay to get your feelings hurt when somebody doesn't have time for you in the time level that you want, because they're respecting their own time. And you've got to make sure that you do too. So those time boundaries are really important. My mother-in-law called yesterday and said that they were going to do something for her sister who had passed away, and they've been trying to plan an event. And they asked me, what are you doing this weekend in November? And unfortunately, I had already committed that weekend to a student's wedding. And I had promised I will be there, and I'm going to her wedding. I had to say, I am so sorry. I can't. I have this. I've already made that a priority. I'm so sorry. And that's when we're talking about time boundaries. If you say, I can only stay an hour, you go ahead and set that boundary. I can only stay an hour. Or you ask somebody, do you have time to chat today? My cousin Karen and I do that all the time. We set aside time, because when we talk, we catch up on a lot of things. So we talk for quite a while, and that's okay. It's okay that we do that, because she lives in California and I'm here in North Carolina, and we don't see each other often, but we try every 2 or 3 months or so to set a time to spend that time with one another, talking and catching up, because we love one another and we want to make sure our relationship connects. So we do things like that. I would love to help, but I would be overcommitting myself. Is there another time? You can always say these things. You can't really set a boundary and then not communicate that boundary. And that's important that we communicate so that relationships can actually thrive that way. A relationship won't thrive without great communication. So when you honor that time boundary by communicating it, that lets you know that, and it lets the other person know that you genuinely care. You've just got to do it in a place with your time that is respectful on both ends. So we have to look at that. Number 4 is sexual boundaries. Now, this is important because we have to have healthy sexual boundaries in our life as adults. And even as teenagers, it's something that as parents, we have to teach our children. Having healthy sexual boundaries includes consent, agreement, respect, understanding of preferences and desires, and privacy. A lot of people are not trustworthy when it comes to this area. And they run their mouth, or they complain, or whatever, and you have just crossed a major line when you discuss or you try to put your preferences on the other person when it comes to sexual boundaries. We have to understand, because when it comes to sexual boundaries, that is an extremely vulnerable, intimate thing between two people. And crossing those particular boundaries is lifetime damaging. You can be responsible for messing someone up. So we must make sure that we communicate and we are clear on our boundaries. If we say no and it's a firm no, somebody needs to respect that. The other person needs to be respectful of that. If there's a preference that we have and the other person doesn't have that preference, then we need to be respectful of that and go, well, do I really need that preference? Do I really need that more than I need them? Especially in a marriage relationship, it's not just about you. And when we're in a sexual situation, it can come across as if it's all about you because of the way you feel in that moment, but not. The other person, in order to have a pleasurable experience between two people, you have to have the give and take, and you have to have the communication, and you have to have the trust, and you have to know that beyond a shadow of doubt, it's not going to be talked about outside of that circle of relationship. It's just not going to be talked about. It's private. It's between you and the other person, and no one else needs to know about that. So we just, that's just an area that you don't go into and you don't need to know. And you certainly don't need to post it on social media or anything like that. That's just too much. It's too much, and it goes beyond a boundary. When you're in a situation like that, asking for consent, that's a good thing. Not assuming consent, but asking. Discussing and asking what pleases you. That's a good thing. If you're in a relationship, discussing about it, that's a good thing. Requesting condom use, if you prefer it, that's a good thing. For sexual safety, that's a good thing. And I know I'm going deep here, but we're talking about boundaries between human beings. Discussing contraception, that's a good thing. Not just assuming that the woman is taking care of everything. That's a good thing. Because it's not fair to have an unplanned pregnancy. That's not fair on the child. That's not fair on the child, and it certainly isn't fair to the mother and the father. So you gotta think through these things, people. You've got to think through it. Saying no to things that you don't like or that hurt. Of course, for me, I'm like, why would you do that anyway? But God bless you. You do you. But I got to make sure that everything in a private, intimate situation is okay between both people. You just got to make sure of that, because that can be very damaging to another person if it's not. Protecting the privacy of another person. Protect the other person. And protect yourself. I mean, think about it. Talking about it can be so damaging to you, and it can be damaging to them. And there's also, nowadays in theater, there's also the intimacy training that they go through when scenes in a play are, whether they're sexual in nature or whether they are violent in nature or whatever, they choreograph the whole thing and make sure that everybody is comfortable in it. And you have to speak up in situations like that, because in theater and in movies, they try to represent what happens in real life so that we can emotionally understand and be a part of the story and see ourselves in it and have empathy. And so this intimacy training that they do is to keep both parties safe and comfortable in the situation. So there, again, you've got to communicate. You've got to communicate what is comfortable to you and what is not comfortable to you, so that nothing is misinterpreted during the scene. Too many people have crossed lines, and let's be protective of one another. Okay, 5, intellectual boundaries. Intellectual boundaries refer to your thoughts, ideas, and curiosity. Health intellectual boundaries include respect for the ideas of other people, and they can be violated when your thoughts and curiosity are shut down, dismissed, and belittled. I have thoughts and you have thoughts. I'm going to narrow this thing down. I have thoughts and you have thoughts, and my thoughts are okay and your thoughts are okay. But it's not okay to push your opinion on me, just like it's not okay for me to push my opinion on you. And screaming at me that I'm wrong and you're right is not going to fix the situation. In fact, it crosses the boundary. And you've got to think about that. You've got to stop for a moment and think, do I really see that person as an enemy? An intellectual enemy? We are not here on this earth to be one another's enemies. We are here to learn and grow with one another. We are not here to beat one another up. Emotionally, physically, intellectually, sexually, this is not what we're here for. So we've got to make sure that we are paying attention and we're really listening to one another. This all goes back to communication, and that we're really listening, and that we're not so stuck on our own thoughts and our own opinions that we can't hear somebody else's and we roll right over them. We've got to continue to be respectful. You can internally disagree all you want to, but it doesn't give you the right to scream, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Because the other person probably feels the same way. And to have respectful debate and dialogue is what we're after, especially when we're having an intellectual conversation. We have to make sure, if we want healthy intellectual interaction, then we have to maintain respect and be willing to dialogue. That's the best way to have a conversation, to solve issues, and to recognize everybody is smart. And everybody has intellect, and everybody has ideas, and no one idea will, save the world. We have to all come together for that. And that's the way that is really going to work. So maybe say something like, I know we disagree, but I won't let you belittle me like that. Because a lot of times we get belittled. I've been belittled a lot. And I say that, and I never would say anything back to anybody because I didn't want them to be hurt in the same way I was being hurt. So I've carried a lot of pain because people would not stop pushing on me and belittling me and making me feel smaller than I am. And in my silence, I was saying, I would never treat you this way. Now I wish I said, okay, we can agree to disagree, but I'm not going to allow you to belittle me like that. That isn't okay. You're crossing a boundary, and that's not okay. And I can honestly say, knowing who I'm talking about, they probably would have continued to do the behavior. So, but at least I would have put the boundary out there, and then it's my choice to be able to walk off from the situation, because the best way to stop a situation and stop an argument is just not to participate and turn around and walk off. You can say, I would love to talk about this more, but I don't think talking about it during Thanksgiving dinner is the best time. I think that one's really funny because we all know what happens when family gets together. So that one's really funny. I thought I would throw that one out there just so that everybody could chuckle because yeah, right? Maybe this isn't the right time to discuss it. So, let's be respectful. Let's be respectful of the time that we're together, and let's be respectful of one another's opinions and thoughts. Material boundaries. That's number 6. Material boundaries. Material boundaries refer to terms and possessions like your home, car, clothing, jewelry, furniture, money, etc., etc. It is healthy to understand what you can and cannot share and how you respect your items and materials to be treated by people you share them with. That's really important. I've had trouble with that in my life, not me disrespecting somebody else's stuff, but others disrespecting mine. And that's not an okay thing for people to do. And I have used not okay, not okay, not okay over and over and over again in this podcast because that's a firm statement from me. This is not okay. If you buy a car or somebody gives you a car, take care of it. It is disrespectful to turn it into a rolling garbage can when it was a gift. It is disrespectful to get a gift and then look at a person and say, why did you give me that? I don't even like it. That's not okay to say. And that's disrespectful for the thought. You don't have to say that. You can wait till later and you can do something else with it. You can regift it. You can donate it. Do whatever. But don't hurt the person's feelings just because they gave you a gift that they thought was a good gift. Be respectful to that. Also, remember the phrase, leave a place better than you found it. Leave a place better than you found it. If your child spills something on somebody's white carpet, offer to have the carpet cleaned for them. That's the thing to do. Get down there, start dealing with the stain, and then offer to have the stain removed for them. Yeah, sometimes it's going to cost you out of your pocket, but it's somebody else's house. And you need to respect the boundary of their property because you would want that done for you in the exact same way. Again, the golden rule, do unto others, you would have them do unto you. And that's the way we need to think about things. In all things, I think most boundaries would be taken care of if we would just remember that scripture. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Most of these things are about communication and respect and thinking about the other person and thinking about yourself in the same way and going, I don't want people to run over me, therefore I don't want to run over anybody else. That helps on the stage and that helps in life. Okay, remember next week that Skylar Smith is going to be with us and she's going to be talking about nutrition and fitness and her new fitness line and being a young woman in business and how that helps her with her body, mind, and soul and what she can do to help you. So it's going to be a great conversation with Sky. I cannot wait for you to meet her. And remember that the podcast drops on Monday, every single Monday. Make sure you like, comment, and share this podcast. And as always, I'm Crystal McDaniel, and this is The Naked Singer.